Under the lights of a fading season, Yamaha's great gamble has become its greatest ghost. The V4 that was meant to resurrect a legacy now trembles on the edge of mechanical despair, a machine born from desperation, chasing the echo of Ducati's dominance and finding only its own echoing flaws. In the data rooms of Iwata, numbers whisper what no one dares to say aloud. Geometry has betrayed genius, and trust has turned attention. Fabio Quartararo, once the symbol of Yamaha's faith, now rides between belief and betrayal, his throttle hand steady, but his conviction slipping millimeter by millimeter. Every straight exposes their deficit, every corner their confusion, every lap the slow unraveling of a myth. Inside the garage, silence hums louder than the engine, the silence of engineers out of answers and a rider out of patience. Valencia looms not as a test, but as a verdict, where milliseconds will decide the fate of an empire and the loyalty of its last believer. Because this is no longer about speed. It's about survival, the kind measured not in horsepower but in heart. And somewhere between data and doubt, one truth waits to be proven. Can Yamaha still rise, or has the V4 already written its own obituary? And as the lights dim over Sepang's trembling tarmac, the story begins where hope once roared loudest, with a great gamble that was meant to save Yamaha, and instead began its quiet collapse. Yamaha's long-awaited V4 project was supposed to be the turning point, the radical engineering shift that would finally end years of mediocrity. The paddock expected thunder, but what arrived instead was a hesitant murmur carried by a machine unsure of its own rhythm. Every test since Misano has whispered the same uncomfortable truth. Evolution without conviction turns into noise. Engineers stare at data streams that tell a cruel story of horsepower lost in translation. 6 weeks after its debut, the Sepang wildcard revealed just how little progress had been made, transforming optimism into ritualized disappointment. The V4 was meant to roar, yet it breathes like a caged animal, tight, suffocated, unsure where its power truly lives. It was a statement of intent, said a Yamaha insider, and now it's a statement of crisis. Under fluorescent garage lights, mechanics work in near silence, haunted by the echo of revs that never quite reach expectation. Fabio Quartararo walks past the bike, helmet in hand, wondering if faith alone can move pistons. Maybe it's me, he thinks briefly, or maybe it's the ghost of an idea that never became real metal. A little-known technical detail emerges from the engineer's notes. The combustion chamber angles, copied from Ducati's architecture, create turbulent zones that disrupt mid-range torque. It's like a painter borrowing another's brushstroke only to realize the canvas rejects the gesture. The switch from the traditional inline-4 to this V4 has gone from bold to broken, and the statistics prove it. Top speed deficits, irregular throttle response, and a vibration pattern so complex it fooled Yamaha's own sensors. The feeling among riders is that the bike fights itself, a machine divided between identity and ambition. Each corner exit becomes an act of negotiation, each straight a reminder of what was lost. Fernandez finished dead last among the riders who stayed upright, almost 47 seconds off the race winner, and still insisted the potential was there somewhere, hidden under layers of uncooperative geometry. To watch the V4 now is to watch a promise unravel in real time. The garage smells of fuel and disillusionment, the kind that seeps into conversations and silences alike. Mechanics talk about millimeters as if they were prayers, chasing balance in a frame that refuses to listen. A senior engineer describes the problem as cascading stiffness, meaning each fix breaks something else. The metaphor feels painfully apt, a domino made of titanium and hope collapsing in slow motion. When night falls on Sepang and the engines cool, the only sound left is the quiet click of a stopwatch marking wasted seconds. Yamaha thought they were building a phoenix. Instead, they've built a beautiful, expensive albatross. Fernandez was brutally honest about the scale of Yamaha's problem. It's been a tough weekend for us. We started worse than we finished at Misano. The only positive thing is that we know we have the same problem as in Misano. We can say that the only positive is this, that we have a clear direction to follow for the next test and for Valencia. But we need parts. We need something more, because we did everything we could with what we had. Those words carry the exhaustion of a rider trapped between duty and disbelief. In the Sepang heat, the blue machine shimmered like a mirage, promising speed and delivering silence. Inside the paddock, everyone whispered the same quiet verdict. Yamaha's V4 isn't sick. It's still unborn. Fernandez's telemetry told a story of scarcity rather than failure, a potential strangled by corporate caution. Insiders confirmed that Yamaha even limited his available power in Malaysia, preferring to play it safe with engine mileage and data integrity rather than risk an early mechanical failure. That choice protected data but destroyed dignity. What's the point of testing if I'm not allowed to feel the limit? He thought bitterly, helmet pressed against the tank, listening to the muted heartbeat of an engine afraid of itself. His best qualifying lap, 1 minute 59.382 seconds, more than 2 seconds slower than Fernand Alder's Ducati, exposed how wide the gap had grown. The engineers noted that the V4's exhaust collector design created uneven pulse timing, a small but devastating flaw that turned power delivery into a stutter instead of a surge. It's like trying to run a marathon with one shoe half-tied, each step costing more effort than the last. Tire degradation completely crippled the bike's consistency, said Fernandez, and that statement felt like an epitaph carved into rubber. The problem wasn't grip alone. It was the entire rhythm of acceleration, braking, and recovery falling out of sync. When the tires faded, so did belief. When the tire drop is greater, you can't get the bike to work well in all the laps. We have to find a solution to make it work easier in all the laps and not only in some. His tone was calm, but beneath it ran a quiet fury, the kind that turns patience into prophecy. The data sheets became like confessionals, filled with numbers that no longer promised redemption. Mechanics debated tenths of a millimeter in ride height while knowing deep down that geometry alone couldn't save them. A development program without risk is a body without pulse. The V4 sat in the box after sunset, panels off, wires exposed, looking more like an experiment than a weapon. Fernandez stayed long after everyone else, staring at the bike as if waiting for it to breathe differently. Maybe next test, he told himself, maybe Valencia. But in that thought lingered something heavier than hope, the realization that direction without motion is just another word for despair. Veteran journalist Matt Oxley didn't mince words on the Oxley Bomb podcast. This is their second race with a V4, and they don't seem to have made any real progress since Misano. He added, I was really surprised when he told us on Friday that they hadn't been testing between Misano and here. And the bombshell came quietly, devastating in its precision. The swing arm pivot is right at the bottom of its travel, at the extreme limit. When you start with a new bike, big things like that should be around the middle. So you can go this way or that way. They're already at one extreme of a very vital geometry traction factor. It was the kind of statement that sends a chill through any engineering department because geometry is destiny in MotoGP. Inside Yamaha's box, screens flickered with SAD overlays showing numbers that no longer made sense. A little-known technical detail emerged from one mechanic's notes. The torsional rigidity coefficient had drifted 25% higher than baseline, locking the frame into an unforgiving stiffness that killed traction on corner exit. We boxed ourselves in before the development has even truly begun, admitted one engineer off-record, staring at the blueprint like a condemned map. How do we end up here, he thought, chasing millimeters that lead nowhere? The garage felt smaller that night, heavy with the static of overanalysis and self-doubt. When a chassis loses its breathing room, it's like a dancer forced to move on a floor too narrow, every gesture constrained before it begins. The V4's promise of flexibility had turned into the rigidity of a mistake, a paradox made of aluminum and pride. Yamaha's technicians, once confident surgeons of precision, now behaved like archaeologists brushing dust from a fossil that refused to reveal its shape. Oxley's voice echoed through the paddock corridors, its calm English cadence masking a warning that sounded almost elegiac. The swing arm pivot's position at the bottom of its travel meant the very heart of mechanical adjustment was gone. They had reached the cliff's edge with nowhere left to tune. Engineers dread that moment because it transforms innovation into autopsy. The data readouts looked clean, yet every line whispered resistance, tiny deflections becoming metaphors for stubbornness. In Valencia's simulations, the bike's rear shock recorded a hysteresis curve unseen in any Yamaha file since 2016, proof that the new frame flexed in unpredictable ways. There's no margin left for adjustment, said a technician, his voice flat but eyes red from sleepless nights. Maybe the concept is wrong, another thought, but it's too late to confess it now. The V4 sat gleaming under fluorescent light, beautiful and wrong, like a sculpture that could never move. A geometry problem had become a psychological one, shrinking the boundary between metal fatigue and human fatigue. And when the last wrench clinked onto the tray, someone murmured the line that would define the evening. The fundamental frame geometry might be wrong. In that sentence, you could hear the collapse of belief. Despite his trademark calm, Fabio Quartararo's patience is visibly eroding, like paint flaking from a helmet left too long in the sun. He finished fifth at Sepang and admitted, "The gap is still big," a phrase that landed with the dull weight of inevitability. Each word sounded less like complaint and more like resignation carved into air. The Frenchman has carried Yamaha for 3 long seasons, his talent compensating for deficits that engineering refused to solve. Inside the garage, silence has become its own language, full of things no one dares to say aloud. How many more times can I defend what I no longer believe in? He wonders, staring at the telemetry lines that feel more like pulse readings than data. His lap traces are graceful but sterile, beauty detached from victory. Insiders whisper that he's already warned Yamaha. 2026 will be his final act of faith if nothing changes. The gap is still big, he repeats to the cameras, but his eyes tell the real story. The gap is not just mechanical, it's emotional. A little-known technical note from Sepang revealed the bike's ride-high device engaging 3 milliseconds late at corner exit, costing 0.2 down the back straight. That infinitesimal lag feels colossal when you're fighting for air against Ducatis that accelerate like thrown stones. Yamaha's engineers call it latency. Quartararo calls it frustration measured in meters. The metaphor fits. He is a lighthouse still shining, but surrounded by fog of his team's making. Each corner becomes a psychological test. Lean deeper, brake later, believe harder. Yet belief, unlike grip, cannot be engineered. "It's pretty much what I expected," he said after the race, his voice calm but hollow, the quiet of a rider who knows the script by heart. When Joe Mear's Honda attacked in the closing laps, Fabio defended like instinct itself, but afterwards he admitted, "More than a battle, I had to defend myself. He was faster than me, but I still tried to close all the doors." Those words capture the paradox of his season, strength used only to resist rather than to conquer. He tells reporters he's focused on 2026, but every glance toward the pit wall carries a question about escape. Maybe Marquez was right, he thinks briefly. Maybe courage is leaving before the light fades. His calm exterior is now armor, polished by repetition, dented by disappointment. Even victories of will cannot disguise a machine that refuses to evolve. The team speaks of new parts, new hope, yet the calendar shows fewer races left to redeem the promise. At night in his motorhome, he rewatches onboard footage, each frame a study in patience and decay. What was once devotion is turning into distance. When the camera catches him before the next race, his smile is professional, his eyes older. The climax of this story isn't a crash or a triumph, but a slow disconnection, and it ends in a single sentence whispered into his visor before lights out. Trust has a rev limit, and Yamaha just hit it. Inside the paddock, one insider put it bluntly, without Quartararo, Yamaha would have endured a miserable season. Those words hung in the humid air of the Malaysian pit lane, like the smell of overworked clutch plates. Alex Rins has struggled all year, and the satellite Premac Yamaha squad sits anchored at the bottom of the team's standings. Another voice added, soft but merciless. What was once a dynasty of rhythm and corner speed has become a team counting its missteps instead of trophies. The V4 engine was meant to prove that the company could adapt not just to rival architectures, but to a new era of MotoGP defined by traction control sophistication, seamless gearboxes, and aggressive aero. Yet that new era has left them gasping for oxygen, trapped beneath the glitter of their own history. In the meeting room, engineers whisper over printouts while the clock above the whiteboard ticks like a metronome marking decline. "How do we trade soul for numbers?" thinks one veteran mechanic, tracing his finger along a graph that falls instead of climbs. The V4 has yet to deliver on any of that promise, admits a technical director whose confidence now sounds borrowed. Yamaha's philosophy was built on balance, but now the balance is tipped toward desperation. A little-known technical detail deep within the factory notes reveals the rear brake's electronic bias control oscillates under load, creating unpredictable pressure that unsettles the chassis mid-corner. The flaw is minor, almost invisible, yet it turns stability into uncertainty at 300 kilometers per hour. The metaphor feels brutal but true. Yamaha is a clock that still ticks but has forgotten what time it keeps. Every department moves, yet no one moves forward. The satellite team reports the same complaints with eerie precision: too stiff at lean, too lazy at turn-in, too late at hope. Even Oxley admitted hearing mumblings that the bike might not even be ready for 2026. And the paddock believes him because silence from Iwata has become its own confirmation. Engineers stare at dyno screens like fortune tellers who no longer trust their carts. If Fabio leaves, What are we left with? Just a noise? One team member asks in a whisper. No one answers. The Premac garage, once painted in ambition, now echoes with the sound of air tools fixing the same problems for the 100th time. Mechanics speak in half sentences, communication breaking down as fast as confidence. The technical sheets may say progress, but the eyes of the riders say paralysis. Yamaha's paddock presence, once commanding, now feels like nostalgia dressed in blue. Hope is rationed, data worshipped, patience expired. In this fading light of October, the great factory looks less like a contender and more like a monument to what used to work. The climax is cruel in its quietness. The stopwatch no longer measures performance. It measures faith, and faith is running out of time. If the engine and chassis have not improved by Valencia, it will be a real worry for Yamaha. That line, spoken in the measured cadence of a journalist, has become a prayer and a threat whispered through the paddock. Valencia now stands less as a racetrack and more as a reckoning written in asphalt. Every engineer knows it. Every mechanic feels it in the tremor of each torque wrench. The factory's corridors buzz with sleepless urgency, the air tasting faintly of metal and anxiety. Simon Patterson added his twist on the Race MotoGP podcast. Any potential transition for Fabio away from Yamaha is going to be made a lot easier by spending 2026 riding any V4, even if it's not very good. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot to an extent with that. Those words sting because they're true. Yamaha's own experiment may become the bridge that carries their champion away. What if this test isn't redemption, but farewell? Wonders a senior engineer as he scrolls through simulation graphs showing incremental gains that still fall short. The factory's focus has shifted from progress to persuasion. They are not only building a motorcycle, they are building an argument for loyalty. My gut feeling is the decision for Fabio will probably come after Jerez and the Monday test in May. Everyone will wait for Fabio, Patterson continued, his tone part prophecy, part obituary. A little-known technical document leaked from the testing department notes a 1.2% drop in lateral stiffness due to revised engine mounts, tiny, yet critical to traction consistency. That fraction of flex could be salvation or ruin. Yamaha's leadership calls it a step forward. The riders call it a question mark. The metaphor fits. Valencia is the edge of a cliff disguised as a finish line. Every lap there will be an act of confession, every data point a plea for forgiveness. Their V4 isn't a dead end, the engineers insist, though the phrase sounds like self-reassurance. In the paddock, rumor and reality blend like oil and water, impossible to separate. Quartararo listens to updates with polite detachment, his mind already mapping futures beyond the blue. I'll give them one more chance, he tells himself, but chances don't reset with every season. The team's optimism feels rehearsed, a script written to mask the sound of a ticking clock. Valencia will decide not just performance, but destiny, and everyone knows it. As the sun sets behind the circuit's grandstands, the garages glow like confessionals waiting for truth. The climax comes quietly, inevitable, and cold. In MotoGP, deadlines don't forgive, and Yamaha's time is almost up. Quartararo hasn't hidden his admiration for Marc Marquez's daring rebirth, and in that admiration lies a confession Yamaha can no longer ignore. Speaking to motorsport.com, he praised, "It's really an example. What he has done has shown that in 2 years, he went from doing nothing because of the bike, not a rider issue, to winning races in 2024 and now dominating the 2025 championship. What he has done is spectacular." Beneath those words, the subtext glows like heat from an overworked engine. He sees in Marquez's journey a mirror of his own frustrations. He watches the Spaniard's comeback with equal parts awe and envy, tracing the arc of redemption he wishes to follow. If he found a way out, maybe I can too, Fabio thinks, letting the thought linger like an unspoken promise. Around him, Yamaha's walls feel smaller, the air thicker with the weight of unrealized potential. He'd be crazy to stay at Yamaha without proof the V4 can win, said one paddock insider, and even those within Iwata's ranks nod silently. He would be crazy to sign on the dotted line without being sure they could give him a respectable bit of kit, added former rider Michael Laverty, and that line has become the echo following every Yamaha press release. The comparison between Marquez's courage and Quartararo's caution defines this new chapter of MotoGP, a tale of two champions standing at different edges of faith. A little-known technical detail from Quartararo's telemetry during Misano testing revealed microvibrations in the throttle sensor that forced him to modulate inputs manually, costing hundreds per lap and fragments of confidence. Small numbers, enormous consequences. Yamaha's engineers treat it as solvable. Fabio treats it as symbolic. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece with a trembling hand. Every race he rides now feels like a dialogue with destiny, a conversation between loyalty and liberation. Marquez's story whispers to him in pit lane shadows. Leave before the machine defines you. The metaphor is cruel but fitting. Fabio is a bird perched on a branch that creaks louder each weekend. It's not about respect anymore, one close friend confides. It's about survival. The factories know it. Offers are already forming like storm clouds. Yamaha hopes nostalgia will hold him, but nostalgia doesn't win races. I don't want to spend my prime waiting for potential, he tells himself, and the thought lands like a signature already half-written. The sport watches with morbid fascination, aware that one decision could redraw the map of MotoGP's balance. Every test, every glance across the paddock toward Marquez's garage becomes a study in inevitability. And when Fabio closes his visor before each race, one truth rides with him, clear as throttle scream under floodlights. Heroes don't wait for miracles, they create their exits. Yamaha's situation is now a team full of belief but running out of time, resources, and rider patience. The garage hums with mechanical precision, yet beneath the rhythm of tools and torque maps lies a silence heavier than failure. Every conversation sounds like a countdown disguised as collaboration. The next big milestone, Valencia, will determine if the V4 can recover or collapse entirely, and everyone knows it. Gavin Emmett warned, Quartararo could mentally check out long before 2026 even begins if the team doesn't show visible improvement. It will only force him into leaving them. That phrase echoes in every meeting, a warning disguised as prophecy. Am I already gone in my head? Fabio wonders, staring at the screens glowing with data that no longer inspire. His inner voice, once fueled by defiance, now feels like static over radio waves. The mechanics move methodically, replacing parts that cannot fix trust. A little-known technical anomaly haunts the engineers. The V4's swing-arm load sensors show a micro-delay between compression and rebound, less than 1/10 of a second, yet enough to distort rear-wheel feedback under acceleration. That imperceptible hesitation mirrors the team's own, the pause before belief returns. It's not just about horsepower or corner entry anymore. It's about trust. Someone murmurs in the data room, and the sentence feels like a eulogy. The metaphor writes itself. Yamaha is a cathedral of precision whose stained glass is cracking from within. Quartararo has given Yamaha loyalty, data, and public defense in the face of failure, his professionalism serving as the glue that keeps the illusion of stability intact. But glue cannot hold forever when the weight keeps rising. Each test, each debrief, each polite smile in front of cameras adds another thin layer of fatigue. The engineers talk about direction, the managers about vision, yet the rider hears only echoes of the same unsolved equation. If they don't believe as much as I have, what's left to fight for? He thinks, the thought cutting through the noise like a scalpel. The V4 itself feels symbolic now, beautiful, flawed, and misunderstood, a mirror of Yamaha's misplaced faith. Even the smell of the garage, oil, and ozone carries nostalgia instead of ambition. They once built legends out of precision. Now they build excuses out of timelines. The journalists sense it too, describing the atmosphere as clinical despair dressed in professionalism. As Valencia approaches, optimism thins like tire rubber under heat, fragile and finite. And when Fabio mounts the bike for the test that could define his future, every turn becomes a question of loyalty measured in throttle. The story ends where belief runs out, with one haunting truth whispered across the pit lane. Trust doesn't break suddenly. It erodes, lap by lap, until nothing is left but silence and the sound of someone finally letting go.